Hello and welcome to the Public Square, a show that explores public affairs and religious liberty issues that affect our nation and beyond. I'm your host, Paul Goodridge, and I serve as the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director for the South Central Conference of Seventh day Adventists located in Nashville, Tennessee. In each episode, we'll talk to people who are on the front lines of the fight for civil and religious liberty. My goal is to inform about issues that directly and indirectly have an impact on everyday life, ignite meaningful thought and reflection, inspire my audience to action, and integrate faith principles in how we relate to others. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the election, and more specifically, the aftermath of the election. We're going to talk about what we can expect in the next 4 years. We're going to talk about some of the impacts of the election results. And we're going to look at what we can do as Christians, as Seventh day Adventist Christians, and as citizens to be able to navigate the potential of what's happened over these next 4 years. My guests are we begin with Kevin James. Kevin is the Associate PAL Director for the Southern Union of uh, Seventh day Adventists. And when we say PAL, we mean the Public Affairs and Religious Liberty Director. Kevin, you've been on the show before, so we want to welcome Kevin. Then we also have Dr. Marcia Burden Tiggs. She is the Pre-Law and Legal Studies Program Director at Oakwood University, and she's also been on the show before. We have Cameron Evans. Cameron is a graduating senior, a public policy major with a minor in international relations, also from Oakwood University. And then we later on will introduce our fourth guest when they arrive. So, welcome to the Public Square, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having us, Paul. Good to see you again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. So let's dive in. Let's dive in. It's been a week and 2 days, or maybe a week and a day, since we've heard the results of the elections. Um, Maybe in one sentence, how are you feeling? Kind of, 7, 8 days after this election cycle. All right, I'll
Did
begin
you
with
have
you,
somebody in
Kevin.
mind to go first, or is it just anybody?
Yeah, no, just anybody. But I'll begin. I'll ask you first. How are
Well, I'll
you
go
feeling?
ahead since I spoke up. Um, as somebody who's been watching developments for a number of years now in this country that has been heading towards this point, um, I wasn't surprised. I figured that Trump was going to win this one, especially about a month out here. Um, the when you're running the polls like they were, and they were always neck and neck, that was not a good indicator.
Mhm.
And so, you had this sense, at least I had this sense already, that Trump was going to win. I was a bit surprised, though, that he won so convincingly this time. He took the popular vote along with the electoral votes, and now he has a clear slate in the judiciary and Congress. And of course, he occupies the executive. All of it's going to be GOP. There are slim majorities in Congress, but you have a very definite majority in the judiciary. And so that, I think, becomes something we need to pay close attention to. Um, you know, I'm I want to verge on. I don't want to say that I'm just devastated, but it was certainly a letdown to see how far we've come as a country. To
Mm,
me, this election is an indictment on the character of our nation. It is amply clear what kind of a leader President Trump, or President-elect Trump, is going to be. He's been convicted of two felonies in the in between time. He was also the key igniter for the insurrection on January 6th. He has been very divisive, shamelessly so. We've watched it all, and yet a majority of Americans went for him.
Hmm.
Uh, about 22 million of us, I think it is. There's still a lot of tallies that have not come in completely, but about 22 million of the voting public did not vote. I'm going to be looking. It's going to be very interesting to see how that changed. Kamala Harris lost by some 16,000 votes compared 16 million votes compared to what Biden did the last cycle. Trump lost, interestingly enough, about 4 million votes, even though he was ahead with Kamala. So there, within that scope, there's your 20 to 22 million missing people.
Hmm.
That was not there the last time around. So it's going to be very interesting to see uh, what what the reason was for that. I'm really interested to see in that. But that's where I'm at. We're going to be in for a rough ride. And with the picks that are coming out as of late, it's not looking very pretty. So
Okay.
this is the time to definitely be looking up and praying uh, for insight and wisdom and courage and strength to pay
Okay.
close attention, because I really do believe this is an indictment on the character of our nation.
Okay, okay. Cameron, I want to come to you, but before I do, I want to encourage those of you who are watching, you who are listening as part of our audience. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to place those in the chat, so we can give our guests an opportunity to respond to any questions that you may have or observations you may want to make. But Cameron, as a young person, as somebody who's getting ready to graduate, going out into the cold, cruel world, so to speak, or the the landscape that offers many opportunities. How are you feeling? And as a young person, how are you feeling about the prospects of the United States for the next at least 4 years and beyond?
For the next 4 years, it's interesting. I'll be honest. It's kind of hard to be able to pinpoint it, but what I'll say is I see the United States heading into a state of bipolar antics, which we've already seen kind of being alluded and being proposed now. There's a strong and weighted possibility that the masses seek to choose sides within politics without necessary care for analyzing how both sides of the bicameral government within politics are just using us to stay in or assume power slash control for their specific interest. We see majority of the time both parties end up benefiting corporations and lobbyists more so than the individual citizens like we are here in the United States. So I'd say our goal for the next 4 years, what we need to be able to look forward to and improve on is we need to build community and produce grassroots initiatives and produce a lot of different progress we want to see rather than using political parties to achieve whatever goal we might want to see and might want to have in the future.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, we'll look to unpack that a little bit more in the show. Dr. Burden Tiggs, as somebody who has kept a close eye on on the events over the past few years, what are your observations?
Yeah, so when you ask the question how we would sum it up in one word, I simply say um, it's go time. It's time to be ready. I take a different perspective from everyone. I'm excited because this is what prophecy told us was going to go down. And this is our opportunity to be the light bearers that God has called us to be. And there is a great work that is needed in this country. And so I'm excited because now we have an opportunity to get out there like we're doing on the show,
Hmm.
on all of our platforms, in the classroom, in our communities, and tell people the truth. Where I was disappointed about this entire election process was that honestly, I have realized that the media lied a
Mm.
lot. They lied a lot. And they did it so that there wouldn't be, in my opinion, insurrections and chaos that we saw at the previous election. Because when we look at the polls that came out, the exit surveys, I mean, the numbers weren't even close. It was like the margins were extremely large and they didn't just pop up overnight. So I do believe that honestly, this is a time where we need to tell the truth. And I think this is an opportunity for our church as well as others who are thought leaders who understand the government, who understand politics, who understand the basis and the foundation of our country, and who also understand the word of God to stand up, speak out, and denounce all of the falsities and false narratives that are being put out by everybody,
Mm.
including the incoming president. Because
Okay.
that's what he's really great at, honestly, is selling you a lie and making you drink the Kool-Aid because the lie fits your own narrative. Because let's just be honest, most of us don't like to hear the truth.
Mm.
And we don't want to be set free by the truth either. So I'm not, I know a lot of people are fearful and scared and like, oh, what is going to happen? I'm more so like, we know what's going to happen because the Bible already told us what was going to happen. We need to be preparing everybody else and saying, hey, this is the good news. Jesus says he's coming back, and that's what we have to look forward to.
Okay. Thank you for that. And we'll kind of, definitely kind of look at that from a prophetic and a biblical perspective. But I'm looking at the comments and I see Jean. Jean said, I agree. It's revealing the bad or corrupt character of our nation, or who voted for a felon in the president's seat. So, let's kind of drill down a little bit more. I know, Kevin, you kind of gave the the realities of the president-elect Trump won the popular vote, won the electoral vote. Um, but why do you think that is? Where do you feel we are um, as a nation as it relates to how we see our political leaders, what we look for in our political leaders, and even kind of alluding to Dr. Burden Tigg's point, um, believing the false narrative that many of our religious leaders give.
Well, we're in a very, I think in a very interesting time because, in the sense that one of the biggest factors I think that's affected us globally, but especially in this nation, is social media.
Mm,
Social media has atomized us as Americans into niches and groups and what we would call tribalism. And we're insulated in those groups. We don't allow anything to come in that would counter what we believe and view. We marinate in that which we agree with over and over again. And so I think that's really been a big problem. The other problem has been too is that our nation has for a number of decades now uh, gone into, well, in our politics, let's put it that way. Our politics have moved away from the work of compromise and trying to work things out for the better of the nation to a system that it's win at all costs.
mm,
And I think there's a reason for this. I think there's a historical reason for it. Number one, I think it's because we as a nation do not have a mutual existential threat or enemy out there. Since the Soviet Union collapsed in 1989, there has been a whole new geopolitical global aspect. And we just don't have that boogeyman out there anymore that
mm,
used to threaten American interests. And very soon after that, 1989, about 94 or 95, Newt Gingrich began to do the no on everything. We're just not going to let anybody win. And that spirit developed and got stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger to where you come to Mitch McConnell blocking, a justice at the very last minute, hoping that something would, and rightly so, it did change, and they ended up getting the three ultra conservative justices that they wanted. Everything was no, and if you remember Mitch McConnell in um, uh, the first term of President Obama, he announced very clearly, we're going to be no at everything
Mm-hmm.
that he puts forth. We're going to just be no. And so that's a Newt Gingrich thing. And that's because, and it works because we don't have an existential threat. And so what we're doing now is we're turning in on each other. We've always been a divided nation,
Right.
politically, and a lot of other issues. But because we don't have that existential threat, now we've turned inward on ourselves. And Mike Lukovich, a cartoonist for the the Atlanta Journal Constitution, has a cartoon today where one is sitting there and says, "We have met the enemy, and it's
Hmm.
us."
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. Um, what's your take on this, Dr. Burden Tiggs?
No, I agree 100%. At the end of the day, it's sad because you would think as a nation, you see the progress that we've made, you see the laws and the acts that were placed by Congress on various issues from civil rights
Mm-hmm.
to reproductive rights to all of these things. And then you see in a matter of literally a year, well, two, if we start back in towards 2022, everything that has been going on for the last 50 to 70 years being upended like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is alarming because the same generation that was around when this came into fruition, children are now overturning all of the work that the parents did. And then what's even more alarming is that the new generation, Cameron's generation, like you said, with social media, they are going to extremes as well. It's like there isn't a balance. You go from baby boomers and generation after that trying to say, if you kill a baby, you're going to hell. That's awful. Women shouldn't be doing that. To then now, this new generation saying, I don't want to be with a man because Trump was elected. Let's forget all men. And it's like, what? This is
Mm.
it's just it's extremities. And I do agree that we don't have that outside enemy because we are seen as the leaders of the free world. Everyone is watching us as an example. But what's alarming is the fact that you are about to have a man sit in the presidency who defies all things that our country was founded upon, specifically being a convicted felon. So, in this country, as a convicted felon, you don't have the right to vote, but you have the right to run for presidency and win.
Mm.
How? It doesn't make any sense. And so, if anything, we are being basically, how can I say this? We're literally claiming that something is wrong and we're committing the crimes and saying it's okay. We're being hypocritical. We're
Mm.
becoming a hypocritical nation. And what's even worse about it is that the hypocrisy is being praised. And so you're like, wow. So you get a congratulations for being a criminal and doing something wrong, but then you get persecuted for saying that women should have the right to choose what they decide to do with their body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's alarming, but if we look at history, if we look at the Bible, nothing is new under the sun. So all of these same things have happened in the past. But what is so alarming is that in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, and even in the 90s, there was so much work that was done to ensure that there was a democracy. You know, we know we're a federal republic, but there was so much work done to ensure there was democracy, that everybody that came into this country had rights, had liberties, felt safe and secure. And literally, it looks like in a blink of an eye, all of that is about to be overturned and unchanged.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because, Kevin, you talked about social media being part of this,
Mhm.
what has brought us to this point, and also in terms of the boogeyman. And so, Cameron, I'm thinking about the idea of social media, which kind of has broken down a lot of barriers and allowed us to really get to know people from all around the world. I mean, years ago, before social media, I didn't really know anybody in, Russia or Ukraine or anything like that, or or Israel or in Gaza. But because of social media, you can have a relationship, so to speak, with anybody around the world. And so you get to know them as a person and not necessarily as a boogeyman. And so the idea of let me then turn my frustration or vent my anger to somebody, it then turns inward. What do you think about this idea of social media and what it has done to um, how we view people and how we view issues, Cameron?
I often converse with a lot of my family, friends, and classmates within, especially specifically my generation and my age of people. I honestly have to say this conversation with them has been like we grew up in possibly the best era, but also worst era, in a sense of we're able to see specifically through social media a whole bunch of different avenues, pathways, experiences that a lot of people around the world have that we weren't able to have access to before. So, with that being said, it's alarming and very eye opening to see that we can see the nit and gritty, the rawness, and the mistakes, the horror, the destruction, the positives also of a lot of the experiences we see across TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, different streaming services, even news platforms now have apps and stuff like that. We can always tune in and be able to watch and adhere and listen to what's being going on around the world. For instance, you never thought you'd be able to see kind of dark here, but you never thought you'd be able to see the horrors, the destruction of families, of people literally coming out of rubble in Gaza and different places that are marginalized and have disparity in different civil war countries. So it's kind of crazy to be able to experience this as a young person and be able to have my eyes open to so many different um, experiences from so many different people, but it starts to
Hmm.
shape me and it starts to shape how I see the world, which is bringing a more holistic, more harmonious way of being able to approach people, approach politics, approach regular life, approach social life, approach job working, approach building up communities, building us up for to be, I guess, the adhere and receive a goal of unity, which ultimately is what we all want. But here in America, we're very bipolar, so it's hard to be able to do that. But it's great that social media gives that access to us.
Okay. Let me drill down a little bit because I know that your major, or your minor, sorry, is international relations.
Yes.
And President-elect Trump has made it very clear how he feels about America first, about what he did in terms of pulling away from a lot of the whether it was NATO or a number of these um, agreements and accords in terms of working together. So, between that and then looking at some of his appointments, some of his cabinet picks, that also kind of push that isolationist agenda. Where do you see? And I'll have you respond, Cameron, and then Dr. Tiggs and Kevin, you can join in. Where do you see America standing as far as its international allies and just around the world moving forward?
Um, Honestly, it's interesting. I was giving thought about this earlier today. With Trump, he has a very stern policy on how he feels about integrating and having relations with other nations. He wants to make sure we're back to a status quo and a point of America's the big brother you don't go up against, the big brother you don't question, which honestly has been part of our culture since our mistake, quote unquote, of not getting to World War I quick enough or World War II quick enough, which we see as a that's a result of why we were formerly isolationist. We had those two wars, and we realized we have to have a global front, a global backing, and a global presence within so many different countries, so many different places across the world. So, with Trump being elected and his administration having that goal, um, I see it being very tense. I hope he has a process of being able to balance his stern views and decisiveness of what he says, especially online in the media. Hopefully, he doesn't rile up a lot of other world leaders. But I'm hoping we can produce a a very peaceful, systematic way of dealing with international relations here in America. And I know he wants to revert back to isolationism, but we need to take a more in-depth approach to being able to integrate into other countries without unsettling and unresting those countries. I don't think it's a bad purpose we adopted in being able to integrate into the world and the world systems a lot. But I think we need to take a step back and realize we need to balance our integration with helping rather than integration with forcibly imposing, what's the word I'm trying to use? Imposing our ideas on them.
Hmm. Dr. Tiggs, your thoughts on that in terms of America and as it relates to international relations?
So we have some permanency in certain areas when it comes to the United Nations, international relations, international law. With us being a part of the Security Council and being one of the states that will not be removed, a part of the P5. That gives us a strong leadership amongst the United Nations and the international world as a whole, as looking at this like security force, as well as the other four nations that are affiliated with it. So I believe that we will always have that world leadership and power, not only just because of that, but also when it comes to money, when it comes to culture. A lot of the other nations around the world look at us as role models, as examples. Now,
Mhm.
the problem lies with a couple of things. Number one, we do know that the president is our representative, right? Even though we have ambassadors, he is the face of the nation. The problem lies in some of his, I wouldn't say that he outwardly said it, but indirectly known leaders that he idolizes, and the tactics that they use are not ones of unity, peace, or anything good. For example, the leader of Russia is somebody that he has praised and idolized, but the entire United Nations in the world does not have that same viewpoint. But more importantly, a lot of people are giving Trump a lot of airtime and not enough time to the government officials that are being appointed and that will be nominated and confirmed. And they're going to be the key. Unfortunately, some of his choices are people with extremely strong viewpoints about international relations, immigration,
Mhm.
and they lean towards a negative viewpoint. And that is where we're going to find some very strong issues and problems. But at the same time, again, this is where it's like a nice little shuffle that we do. Money talks, right? And people idolize Trump's ways with money. As well as a lot of the people that he's choosing are, billionaires and they have a lot of influence. So it's going to be interesting how things shake up. I don't think things will get as bad as quickly as everyone's predicting. I think it's going to take a little bit of time because honestly, I think he's going to be dealing with issues in the United States before he can like strongly go to other nations. But yeah, I don't see in the future. I don't see a positive world leadership with him at all. Neither do I see him trying to make peace in areas that are needed.
Mm, mm. So let me kind of turn on the domestic front. And Kevin, I'm going to come to you insofar as so you are the Associate Director for Public Affairs and Religious Liberty. And one of the things that you uh, keep a close eye on is being able to um, kind of navigate how policies, how agendas affect our rights and beliefs as Christians in general, as Seventh Day Adventists in particular. So, what are some of the things from a domestic perspective that you see as a potential cause for concern based on either Project 2025 or some of the picks for the cabinet positions of the president elect, or even just some of the policies that either have started in the first administration or that we kind of get an indication may want to continue in this new administration.
Yeah, just a moment before I answer that question, I just wanted to go back to what
Mm,
Cameron and Ms. Tiggs talked about on the international level. I think it's important to keep an eye that not only were we having problems with democracy in our own nation, but democracy is under suspect in a lot of other nations around the world.
mhm,
We're in a time where democracy is not ascending; it's actually descending, and I think a lot of reason has to do with economics in that our globalization of our world, which was a great success, and it did lift a lot of other nations out of poverty, have left a lot of people destitute and has narrowed wealth into a very, very small amount of people. Something like 10% of the world population holds something like 80%, believe it or not, of the
mhm.
world's wealth. Now, you talk about inequity. And
Yes.
I think because of those inequities, there's a great um, uh, sense of despair about them, and that's why there's not a lot of support for what they call elites or anybody like that. And so democracy apparently hasn't worked very well for some, for quite a few, in fact, in the world. At least that's how they're looking at it. And I think that's significant to think about as well, because it's not just happening here; it's happening in the world. Now, is coming back to the domestic part of what you're talking about. We've already seen a rather devastating blow to religious liberty or our concept of the balance of church and state in
Mm,
this nation. And that is, there were several decisions on religious liberty that the justices decided that basically said there was no problem with establishment issues in this country. Our problems was our free exercise was being crimped, which is crazy. And what the justices have done is they've expanded free exercise greater than any other time in our history, and yet you still have this subset saying that they're being crimped. It's really an interesting dynamic that's going on. Um,
Just sorry, just
yeah.
unpack a little bit. What do you mean by free exercise and establishment?
Okay, so you've got the First Amendment. I think some of us may know some of what the clause is. And the very first amendment in the Constitution has five freedoms: one, religious, speech, and press, and those kind of things. But in the religious clause, there is Congress that shall not establish, religion in the country. That's called the Establishment Clause, and then there
Mhm,
or prohibit the free exercise thereof, which is the Exercise Clause. So America has tried to pursue this balancing act to where religion stays in its on its sideline and government stays on its sideline and do very little mixing as possible.
Hmm.
Because once they start integrating is when you start getting into trouble. It's not that religion can't speak to to government. It's not that government doesn't have a relationship with religion in protecting the rights of expression, religious expression, and those kind of things, as long as it's not expression that's doing harm to other individuals. I mean, it only goes so far. You're not going to be able to sacrifice a virgin on the first full moon in November or something like that and get away with it. That kind of a
Hmm.
thing. That's too extreme, obviously. So there's always been that kind of this balancing act. But the justices have basically ignored the establishment. Now, this is something I've been saying probably for 3 decades, that the left and the right are both dangers to separation of church and state, and they come at it from opposite angles with different interests. For example, the left side fears establishment so much that they tend to work in a way of crimping free exercise, especially in the public sphere. And that alarms those on the right who feel they're losing their free exercise. And they go to protect it so much that they actually establish religion. So
Hmm.
they go to this complete opposite. And that's what's taking hold right now. So we had several cases, and I won't go through those right now, but we had 3 cases in one session here, not I think 2 years ago, that dealt with establishment, which was ignored, and therefore, and it had to do with schools, allowing a person to, a leader, a staff person to pray in public school, lead out in religious exercise. And then there were decisions that were allowing the free exercise where even religious institutions now being funded by the state to propagate um, their faith and understanding. Anyways, it kind of gets a little complicated, but what we're seeing is there's just really this erosion that's taking place in America in that healthy separation between church and state. And I believe we're going to see more of that. Now, as far as Project 2025, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I think if they start going after implementing uh, a lot of those ideas, we are going to have a completely restructured government. And we don't know where that's going to go, right? We've been, like Dr. Tiggs was saying, we've been developing this for so long. For the 200 and something years that we've existed, we've been trying
Hmm.
to develop, the balance and to be, you know, uh, a unity and trying to build a freedom for all and whatnot, prosperity for everybody. It hasn't really actually turned out that way, and now everything's starting to go in reverse. There was the longest time thinking that the more secular we would become, the more liberal we would become, the more interested in democracy it would be. What we have discovered is that the opposite has taken place. That instead of developing a more liberal, tolerant society, um, secularism has actually developed a very entrenched conservatism, especially on cultural issues. And so it's not, uh, that doesn't fare well for democracy. And that's one of the reasons I think it's going down, even among young people in Cameron's age. Many young people are very much for an authoritarian type, more of authoritarian type of government because, first of all, democracy is messy. It takes a long time. Authoritarian is a lot more clean and efficient. Are you following what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But it creates a whole host of other problems. It's not I'm not for authoritarianism, but there's a whole host of other issues of civil rights and liberties that come underneath that. But I just see an increasing problem as we go down the line on this.
Hmm. Any response, Dr. Tiggs?
Oh no, yeah, I agree. And it's always what's interesting to me is it's always the battle of the size, honestly. And I think it's the battle of the size only because people are being lazy. If you really actually peel back, you need to see what are the policies that each side is promoting. And honestly, both have their extremities. I agree 100% with that. But I think the problem is that our society is comfortable being ignorant on how our government is structured, how our government is ran, and how laws and policies are in place. If it doesn't have anything to do with the latest TikTok dance, if it has nothing to do with gas prices and why eggs are now $1.78 for six, they don't care, right? But here's the problem: you need to understand how this country is ran to understand your answers to your problems of gas and of eggs and of your basic necessities. I don't think people understand that what happens at the very top and in government affects and trickle down all the
Hmm.
way to your local issues. And if you're not informed, then it is literally going to be to the point where an uninformed person is not helpful. So case in point, I run the citizenship test in one of my classes. I literally give students the citizenship test and say, "Can you pass it?"
Mm.
And it's alarming to me how students who from America, born and raised here, can't answer these questions that we're asking people who are not from here to answer. And they need to be able to answer these
Mhm.
questions. So when it comes to what's happening in our country, things are going to happen not because I feel that the majority wants it to happen. I think things are going to happen because the majority refuse to become enlightened on the process of how things are going to happen. But I'm very curious to see how the next 6 months play out because I do believe that Cameron's generation is going to be that generation that is going to rise up and stand up against um, having one group of people face so much prosperity, wealth, health, and good things, and then everybody else who's not like that group of people are in utter despair and calamity. So I'm curious how that's going to go because in the wake of social media, and we wrote a paper about this. Social media, when it comes to protests, when it comes to movements, everything is instantaneous because you can go live and millions can
Mhm.
see. So that is where my hope does lie in the youth and the young adults generation who are enlightened, who are interested in what's happening. And I'm hoping that they learn. But it's going to be up to us to teach them again the truth and not a lie.
Mm. But do you feel that because you made the point in terms of not seeing the connection of things,
Mhm.
um, not seeing how policies and how agendas trickle down to the everyday choices that we have to make, whether it's not just healthcare, but the ability to get a certain prescription filled, etc., or the money to have that prescription. Do you really think that that this generation or the younger generation sees those connections and are able to then respond based on recognizing those connections, or is it just a case of I just go to the gas station and I realize that gas is now $3 or et cetera a gallon, and feeling that, well, that's the president's fault, and so let me vote somebody else who will immediately allow gas to go down to $1.50 a gallon. Eh, eh,
Um,
eh,
That's the president's fault is hilarious to me because the president has nothing to do with gas prices. But
But
anyways, but people really
but
think
you
that
know
that's what's so common.
exactly.
Yeah, they really do think that. No, I it's really tough, right? In being an educator and stuff, you see it all. I believe that you do have people that are informed, like Cameron, that are studying this, that are really trying to find out truth. And then I think you have another group that just doesn't care. They could care less, right? Because they don't have to. How can I say? They haven't gotten to the point of life yet that is really, as they say, life be lifing. They haven't gotten to that point yet, right? Where they're not feeling, they still have a little connection to mom, a little connection to grandma, a little connection to somebody else. Because I speak for myself. When I was back in college, I wasn't concerned about bills. I was just a student. I was just living my life. It wasn't until I got kicked off insurances and I said, "Oh, this is real." Like I have to be concerned about these things.
Mm,
But I still took my education seriously and I still was informed. So when it did come into play for me, when I'm voting, because I was able to vote a couple of times, I wasn't looking at a person that was just affiliated with a party. I was looking at what they were saying. I'm
mm.
looking at the ballot and I'm not just voting for the president, I'm voting for everybody because you just put a rule out there to say if I play my music a certain amount of decimal level that I can get a ticket. That's not good for me because then you're targeting certain people that play loud music, right? Or you just put a rule in there that says that you're going to allow something to transpire that I just have an opposing view on. And so I do think that there are people that are woke. Um, is the majority? I can't say. But the good news about social media and the good news about this generation is all it takes is one person to go viral.
Mm.
And we are we're good. We just need one. Just one. One that is willing and that is informed. But I think that I think we're about to get even a war, even more so on media outlets, because I think it's going to be the conspiracy theorists, misinformed versus the informed, and then it's going to be like, which side are you on? That's really what I think.
So it's interesting because Tony Graham asked the question, how can we differentiate between fake and real news, though? I feel like both the left and right push false narratives. Don't even know if I'm being informed correctly. So Cameron, you're the voice of this generation. Do you feel it? That by and large our young people are able to differentiate truth from the fake, or are they informed, or do they care, do they not care?
Interesting enough. I think my generation is pretty adept at. We've been around media, social media, technology, probably since the days we were born. Honestly, especially depending on what year we were born. I was born in 2000. I'm pretty sure I've had access to at least experience 90s technology and then the ascension of 2000s and 2010s technology as I've gotten older. It allows us to kind of have a knack for differentiating what could be real, what could be fake, what could be AI, what could be true, authentic reality. So to speak on that specifically, um, social media has the access for us to see the raw, the real. Majority of the time, our generation can differentiate what those real and raw moments are. Um, what I will say are streaming platforms of news, watching on cable, watching CNN, watching Fox. They are very guided and very misinterpreted purposely for us to be able to at least accept what they say as fact or think about what they're saying and form our own opinions in our brain, which might be miscalculated or misinformed. So, with that being said, I see it as a true issue that a lot of my generation, and hopefully your guys' generation and people before you can start to analyze and really critique what we see, what we intake, and try and differentiate it as truth or as just speculation. Um, Going back to what Dr. Burden was saying and what Mr. James was saying, we have an issue as a community here in America of not looking up and seeing who's trying to pull the puppet strings. So I think with my generation, we've grown up in an age where we've had no other option in certain spaces but to look up and see who's pulling the strings for us. So we can then take control of those strings and start pushing our own policies, our own narrative, our own issues, our own needs that we need to be able to focus on for our future because we're ultimately the people who are going to inherit this country and inherit the earth ultimately. Um, so we need to start realizing the people that are in power that are of a certain age limit that don't necessarily see want or want change for our future. We need to realize that we need to take those strings from those people and hold them in our own clutches, so that we can make sure we orchestrate how we want them to be orchestrated.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay, so oh yeah, go ahead.
I just want to jump in really quickly. One of the ways that you can, in my opinion, differentiate between fake news and real news is to read, specifically read the Constitution, as well as any type of book that talks about America, its development, and how the government operates. And that will really inform you as to differentiate from fake news and real news. Also, too, I will say about real news, once the truth is out and it's consistent. Look at consistency of stories and consistency of the media. If you just get some media outlet that's just on the polar extreme of something, more than likely it's fake. And it could be on either side. So look for consistency of articles and consistency of videos and postings, and then that also will lead to truth as well.
Hmm.
To
I
go
think
off of
what
that,
Doctor's saying is something that we don't naturally do, though, and that is we have a tendency to stay in the orbit that's comfortable for us. And more now, people are not spending time looking at the other side, trying to be more broadly informed, whether they agree with it or not. The issue is just becoming informed of what else is out there is getting to be very, very difficult because I think social media, with its logarithms and things like that, put us into these, um, camps that we're all involved in. So I think it's imperative that the younger generation that Cameron is part of is that they need to partake widely of different media. And I think what Dr. Tig says, if you get the consistency out there on a particular topic or subject or whatever popped up on the news, and you're seeing a consistency across the platforms that are already biased. Look, when you go into looking at news, you have to realize they all are biased. CNN, MSNBC, One Nation, Fox News, New Nation, or whatever these new ones that are coming up
Hmm.
right now, they've all got a particular bent. And if you watch them for a while, you can see what the bents are. But it actually takes watching them, all of them, or at least touching base with them, not necessarily saturating in one or the other. That's where I think we get into trouble about being easily misinformed. I'm going to add one other thing here on a spiritual level because I think it's really
Yeah.
important in this time that we have essentially embraced as a nation a liar in chief.
Mm.
We embrace a person that we know lies, and how we can put any kind of confidence in that individual is amazing to me. And I think what it's really going to require in this day and age is discernment. I
Mm.
think we're going to have the spirit discernment that God promises us, a wisdom that is given to us to be able to sort through the lies, the AI, the deep fakes, everything that goes on. It's just going to take the Holy Spirit guiding us. And I know all of us have had that experience where something doesn't quite ring true,
Mm.
and you follow on through and you discover that. And so it's really important. I think also because we're in a Christian context here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Christian institution there in Oakwood, a Christian institution with the union and whatnot. And I think it's really imperative in these days that all of us, all of God's people, are very clear on their identity in Christ.
Mhm.
Mm.
Not their identity in their political ideology, not their identity in what they like or dislike per se, but that we are ambassadors for the kingdom of Christ, and that we need to become more and more in tune with the business and the prerogatives of the kingdom in order to navigate the incredibly complex and much more confusing and complicated world in which we're in. And I really think it's going to take that kind of discernment, that level of discernment, to be able to get through these times safely and aware and properly informed. Because I agree with Dr. Tiggs and Mr. Evans here that um, there's all manner of information out there now, and it's not easy to see what might be the truth or not. But we're definitely going to have to be better consumers and a little more wiser on what we're consuming, and just recognizing our own biases and willing to set those aside at times, just so that we can um, assess more properly. Many times we become enlightened by those that disagree with us, and so I think we always need to be open to that as well.
Yeah. So, in the few minutes that we have left, we're kind of coming back full circle to Dr. Tiggs, where you were sharing that, you feel that this is more of an exciting time insofar as it gives us an opportunity as Christians. It gives us an opportunity as individuals who have a history of an understanding of prophecy, an understanding of the end of time, the understanding of events, what will happen, and we can begin to see how that could be possible. So, with that in mind, I know Kevin, you just kind of shared in terms of praying for discernment, but what else can we do as individuals, as Christians, as a church, to be able to prepare people for what's coming and what has been prophesied?
Yeah, so shout out to Pastor Dr. William Lee at First SDA Church. He said this last Sabbath, and it's true. He said, everyone needs to take out the great controversy and read it again,
Hmm.
and read it and ask for the Holy Spirit as you read it. And I think that we have some great literature, within our denomination, from prophets and others who have written on that. We also need to take a good look at Daniel and Revelation. We need
Hmm.
to also find commentary that is speaking to truth and read on it. But also bring out that history book, bring out that social studies book, that government book, find that law and policy blog, because what what I want us to understand as a church is that when we think about the life of Christ, and when we think about all of the great prophets, in the Bible, they not only preached the word of God that Jesus saved, they also had a relevant message for every time frame that they were in about the government and institutions that were in
Hmm.
control. What did Jesus say? He said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That was government, folks. That was just not him just coding something out of the blue. That was the government that was in charge. When we look at Daniel and the three Hebrew boys and what they went through, they were dealing with the government.
Hmm.
So I do believe that a part of that Pentecost, a part of the latter rain, is us sounding the alarm and saying, hey, look at the government, look at what it was built upon. Look at that First Amendment right. Look at your religious freedoms and what it said in the Constitution originally. Look at that original language. And now look at what's trying to happen to that. Look at how they're trying to merge church and state. Look at how they're trying to make minority religions obsolete and non-existent anymore, and sound that alarm just as loud as Jesus saves. I think that is what we're called to do. We have to stay informed because the Bible's already told us that even the very elect will be deceived. And we will be deceived because we are not staying in the spirit, as Mr. James said, and asking for God to not only bring back to our remembrance what we've studied and learned, but to help us to be advocates for such a time as this. I
Mm,
always say, I'm still alive because there is still somebody for me to reach. And each one reaches one. And I believe that we're all still here for this time to sound the alarm to America to say, hey, we know you're sad and, just distraught about what's happening right now, but there is good news. Jesus saves, and he wants us to be our brother's keeper.
mm, mm. Thank you. Cameron, do you have anything to add to that in terms of where do we go from here, especially as we understand, based on prophecy, things that have, that are foretold to come, and what responsibility we have recognizing the times and preparing people for those times. What can we do from the youth perspective?
In an ironic approach, because our religion and our viewpoint as Seventh Day Adventists in Christianity is very prophetic. I think we need to start taking a more prophetic and proactive approach to handling our issues with government, our issues with politics, our issues with social interactions within our very toxic political sphere here in America. Um, so, with that being said, I find it very essential for us to start implementing proactive infrastructure, systems, ideals that need to be put in place for us to not just react like how we've been reacting as a church, as a people, as a community. We need to start be able to provide plans before the plans are needed, if that
Mm,
makes sense. That's a way to be able to prevent us from being able to come this far as we already have in our era to experience, as you guys said, a liar in chief, um, be able to kind of insinuate, express, and then implement ideals that he has that don't align with majority of, I guess, not majority of America, but minority America, which is now becoming a majority. So, with that being said, I think it's very essential for us to start putting proactive measures in place, realizing that in our past we've been sold on a lie that America was in the best interest for all, when in fact we still haven't reaped all the benefits of that very saying being said.
mm. Okay,
Yeah, I was
thank
going to was to add as well what Dr. Tiggs and Cameron has to say here, and that I think the great force for good, prophetically speaking, is a Christian, a loving, thoughtful, um, serving minister for Jesus in this world. And that's going to be a person too who's going to be in tune to the times. It's
you.
not you know, you're of such heavenly good, you're not of any earthly good, right? And so heavenly
Yeah.
minded, you're not earthly good. The idea is that when we are the ambassadors of Christ, sharing the gospel, what is just as mentioned. That is our duty, is to share the gospel, and that our liberty is really found not in the documents of this country, but it's found in Christ. And when we come to understand that liberty in our lives, that no circumstance is going to change that. We will always be free, no matter how things change, for the good or for the bad, right? And so we need to stay consistent in just understanding that that our citizenship is in heaven, and that we're here to be ambassadors for Christ, sharing the good news, and that shouldn't ever change. And in that process of sharing the gospel, it's going to be a process of which prophecy develops. Are you with me? Prophecy
Mhm.
develops through God's people allowing the Holy Spirit to unleash itself into this world, making clear of what is right and what is wrong, what is necessary in our lives, and especially the announcement of Jesus and Him being the Savior of the world. These kind of things are going to bring a fulfillment of prophecy as well. The gospel sharing is not divorced from prophetic fulfillment. Are you with
Yeah.
me?
Yeah.
It actually develops the prophecy when God's people are engaged with heaven's agenda in this world. And I think it's we're just going to have to be that more and more informed that way. Again, I'm very much, and a lot of my sermons have been focusing in the last couple of years on the importance of having our identity in Christ very clear
Hmm.
and not being convoluted with our political ideology or anything like that. I think that's very important. And if I can close this real quick, I know we're probably out of time, Paul, but
Yes.
there's an interesting insight I think that can help all of us, you know, look at this in a proper way. And that is when you look at Joshua chapter 5 in verses 13 through 15, Joshua meets the warrior being. Do you remember that just before Jericho? Warrior
Hmm.
being has the weapon drawn, and Joshua runs up and asks the question all of us would ask, and that is, are you for us or for our enemies? Remember, what lay ahead was Jericho, was the big first step in conquering the promised land. And what's interesting is, and when you find out that the warrior being is the pre-incarnate Christ, and how you know that is because that being tells Joshua he needs to remove the sandals off his feet because he stands on holy ground. And it's only a holy God that can make ground holy.
Hmm.
Same thing that happened around the bush. So we know that this being is the pre-incarnate Christ. And why I emphasize that is because the answer of the angel to Joshua is stunning. So when Joshua asks the question, are you for us or for our enemies? The angel says, neither one.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Neither one. Now, you would think that with all the covenant reset that was going on with Israel up to that point, crossing the Jordan, having the circumcision of all the males that hadn't been circumcised during the 40 years of wandering, doing the first Passover since they had gotten into the wilderness. You would think with all that covenant reset, you would have the angel say, of course, I'm with you, Joshua. But that's not what Jesus said. Jesus says neither one.
Mhm.
And so, what Jesus was really confronting Joshua with is that it's the wrong question. What you need to ask is, are you with me?
Mm, yeah.
You need to clarify who you're with because God is above all the divisions of the world. He's in a class of his own, and as we attach ourselves to him, we're in his class as well. We're not going to be weighted down by the divisions and fighting those. We'll be dealing with what the agenda of heaven is, and I think that's something important for us because all of us have to work on it. I work on it every day. Ever since I've read that text and the Lord opened up that text to me, it's been a struggle to truly want to live out that life. But that's what we have to pursue. And we
Yeah.
have to pursue, and I think the way that we inculcate that is to continue to pursue what we as Christians are to be, and that is a light in this world, touching those that are of all classes and sharing the light that's appropriate for whoever it is at the time that we're ministering to. And through that process, God will develop more and more that clarity that we're not bound to this earth, that we rise above the disputes and the divisions of this world, and point people to where true healing and wholeness is found.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm looking at one of the comments. Justin Richards says, yes, beyond spirituality, we must get in the community. Don't wait for the government. We must protect ourselves. Um, and kind of thinking about what you were sharing, Kevin, and the reality is that Jesus, while he was on the earth promoting the kingdom of God, he was
Yeah,
also relieving
yeah,
suffering within individuals right then and there in the towns and the villages where he went. So on the one
mhm,
hand, we have a responsibility to preach the good news of Jesus Christ, to prepare people from a prophetic perspective for the end of time, but we also have a responsibility to help to relieve the suffering that is occurring on this earth. And we can do this through legislation. We can do this through promoting the good works in terms of taking care of fellow human beings and advocating for fellow human beings. Kevin James, Dr. Marcia Burden Tiggs, Cameron Evans, I want to thank you so much for this discussion, for helping to kind of bring some light in terms of what's next. And, where we know there's a large segment of the population who are happy about the results and looking forward to some of the agenda items that, President-elect Trump promised that he would fulfill. We know there are another segment of the population who are very disappointed and discouraged. And so we want to be able to bring healing in the situation, not continue to be, divisive, as Cameron, it has kind of been advocating, but bring healing to the situation, but also recognize that we know how this book is going to end. And we want to prepare as many people for that as possible. So, again, thank you for joining us. And we'll be right back. I'll be right back with some closing thoughts after this quick break. So, as the people of God, as Christians, as those who know, we have been educated, we have been exposed to the last chapter of the book. Ultimately, Jesus wins. Ultimately, there is a stone cut out of the mountain. When we look at the prophecy of Daniel chapter 2 and all of the images and all of the attempts from earthly kingdoms to set up an everlasting kingdom, we know that there is a stone cut out from the mountain without human hands that crumbles the statue and that grows and takes over the earth. And we want to make sure that we are on the side of that stone, that rock, Jesus Christ, to let individuals know that, um, uh, as the song says, kings and kingdoms will all pass away. But there's something about that name, Jesus Christ. Well, this is the last episode for this season, season 3. We thank you for joining us. We look forward to our next season, season 4, that will begin in January. And so please stay on the lookout for that, where we're going to continue to uh, look at the front lines and talk to people who are on the front lines of religious liberty and public affairs, doing what we can to inform people about issues, to ignite meaningful thought and conversation, to integrate thought, spiritual principles, and to inspire people to action. And so until next time, when we meet in the public square, thank you for joining. Please share, subscribe, hit the subscribe button so that when we go live and when we present programs, you can be informed. Please, share this so that more people will be able to join us. And we'll see you next time on the public square.